David, how you doing, man? It's been a while.
Very good, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to bring you on the podcast today. I know we're one team member short on my side. I know I was chatting to you before we started recording here. Ryan's actually out in Curacao. So while we're getting that minus 20 degree Celsius weather here in Canada, he's over getting a nice 30 degrees Celsius weather in Curacao. And so he's taking some much needed downtime. So I really appreciate a much better looking co-host to help join me on the call today.
It's a compliment and an honour. Thanks for having me on. And for Ryan, that's a privilege of being the boss, isn't it?
It is. It is a nice privilege here. I mean, it's the first vacation he's taken since he's been at Quill here, so very, very well deserved, and I'm happy he was able to get some time out there. But hey, before we actually dive into it, I know we got a really exciting topic here with the latest state of recruiting that Firefish put out. Maybe give everyone a quick introduction of yourself before we actually dive into things.
I'm David. I'm the head of partnerships for Firefish Software. We're a recruitment CRM and ATS, really focused around getting users to make better use of the data in their database, eliminating data gaps between the different systems they're using, be that their job boards, LinkedIn, and then data gaps going out the other side as well with the data that you need to send from your CRM to things like pay and bill. By doing this, we can see that we can do two really important things for recruiters: is help reduce operation costs, but then also make the recruiters much more efficient at engaging the candidates and make more placements as off the back of that as well. Every year we do, so let me get this name right, it's a mouthful, the future of the recruitment agency report 2025. So we've just released that last week. It's got some really, so we surveyed recruitment leaders in the UK, and we've got some really interesting insights to share off the back of their feelings about the market.
100%. And I know when you sent that over to us, I think it was last week or the week before, and I had a quick read. It's gold. I love the resource you were able to get. I love the insights we're able to have. And for everyone watching online here as well, we'll actually go through some screen shares as well from the report, because I think there's some incredibly interesting statistics that we're not only noticing from the UK market that we're speaking with, but we're seeing a lot of similar trends even across North America here as well. I thought there were some really interesting marks so around like how recruiter retention or even changes to recruiting structure are going through, and how teams are even using ways to try to attract and get different preferences from the candidate side of things as well. But as we're diving in here, David, any preference where we're kind of starting today? Any topics that you're frothing at the mouth to try to chat through?
Obviously, the AI topic is very interesting to everyone at the moment. Certainly interesting to a conversation with Quill, all the cool AI stuff you're doing. But yeah, I'm happy for you to take the lead and talk
Yeah.
about it.
But if we even look at that AI adoption mark, I think some of the really interesting things that you were noticing from a lot of the clients that you were speaking with there is really where, like, what channels, what markets inside of their business are trying to use AI in. And I think some of the really big ones here are obviously things like candidate sourcing. We know that's a huge lifeblood of the business, finding new people we can chat with. Data enrichment, screening, maybe even the interview process, obviously being a little bit less in there. And I think that's a really interesting topic. I would love to
Yep.
get your thoughts of what's going on there as well. Obviously, from what Firefish and Quill do together as this awesome team, some of the really big ones that we help work together with are things like the database management, helping with the analytics and reporting, making sure we have that accurate information in there, to even around data enrichment, some of the candidate sourcing pieces. What are some of the biggest trends that you're noticing talking to some of your clients across the pond there in the UK, just around some of the big elements they're looking to try to leverage AI in?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing with AI is really a journey in the market. So things like, the initial screening, interview processes, the things that traditionally recruiters do that require a human relationship, they're not wanting to automate that. But what they're looking at automating here, as we can see, but like admin processes, database management, let's just admit it, salespeople haven't been very good at in general over the years. The things that nobody likes it, so they don't engage with it, they maybe not see the longer term value in that. And that's the bits that they're looking to automate. And when we're looking at let's be honest, recruitment businesses have traditionally, if they want to make more money, they throw more bodies at the problem, so increase headcount, but that comes with operational costs of wages, national insurance, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
What we can see here is recruitment agencies are looking to take the non-money making tasks away from recruiters, so they can focus on things like screening candidates, doing interviews with candidates, doing business development, and winning more jobs, while all the admin stuff just goes on with AI in the background. And I think it's a great way for them to to get started and dip their toe and have a solid foundation in their tech stack with AI.
I know there is not a single recruiter you will ever speak with that said they got into recruiting because they really like doing their database updates. That's not the reason anybody's looking to get into a role like this too. Tend to be people who love to be in customer facing roles. And I know I always joke that I don't know if I would ever have a career if my job wasn't talking 90% of the time. If I actually had to do more creative work or some of the other things on the back end, I would probably not be in any kind of position as I am today. And I know recruiters feel the same way as well, where they're really good at building relationships, building trust, and helping those candidates find phenomenal positions that they're looking to fill. And that's obviously the magic sauce of what recruiters can bring to the industry. It's not always keeping Firefish up to date. It's not always making sure our notes are fully up to date on that side. It's part of the battle that we have to go through to make sure that we can be efficient. But exactly to your point, like we want to make sure that we're helping our teams spend their time on revenue generating activities. Because the big thing is we're noticing with market downturns and maybe placements going down from the number of placements that are looking across, the easiest way to increase that efficiency is either decrease our time to fill, so we're increasing cash flow across our business as we're actually looking to maintain what we're doing today, but how can we then reinvest that time that we're buying back to do that business development work, as you mentioned too? Because if we're not filling the top of our funnel, it doesn't matter how efficient we are in the middle, we're going to stay stagnant from that cash flow perspective as well. Now, the one really interesting thing I know that you were mentioning there as well, David, and this is a really cool talking point I know Ryan and I have talked a couple times about on the podcast here, is actually using AI for more of that screening or interview process. I'd love your thoughts. Like, how are you even personally thinking, or how is Firefish thinking about how AI might be able to be leveraged across that screening process versus if that's a process that is really going to be staying recruitment focused, or recruiter focused, I should say?
Yeah, I think when we look at the human side of this, from the candidate's point of view, as they're going to be making, potentially a massive life decision in terms of where they work, where their career goes, in the direction that they move forward in. And I think that at this stage, people really require that for it to be a human to human interaction. So where I can see AI powered interviewing being applied is to your kind of mass recruitment jobs. So like, say I want to, like, Commonwealth Games coming to Glasgow next year, so like, say they'll be hiring hundreds and hundreds of people. There'll be huge demand for people to want to work and be involved in that. And then when you get teams that are on that scale that need to manage those huge recruitment projects, AI has definitely got a place in terms of the initial interview. Okay, let's get some facts. Let's try and start sorting people. But I think when you start looking into a lot of the clients, the markets that we work with, where it's specialized search, a lot of the job is building a relationship with people over years, and you can't do that if you're one of the most important parts of that interaction is being handled by AI. And I think it needs to be handled very carefully from the recruiter's point of view as well. And how they position that. It's certainly a challenge. I think that's maybe why it's not quite there yet. I think people are still a bit scared of AI as well, don't you, Josh?
Oh, I think I always joke, and this is my favorite joke to talk about, David, like, where it's this really thin line between being the Jetsons and the Terminator, right? And we're trying to figure out what that line is going to be looking like. But I think the biggest thing that you mentioned is 100% true. People want a place where they can have relationships in their work. It's not just around where do I have the biggest paycheck? Where do I have, like, if we're all just going to be sharks only caring about the monetary value of it, it's going to be a very shallow existence at that workplace. And we know that's not the reason why people are always looking for new opportunities. And I think the relationship built with the recruiter builds trust within the position that they can then fill, which then makes it a lot easier to do that handoff to actually get that placement to the hiring team so they can actually conduct that interview as well. Because I know from my personal experience, there's actually my cousin's husband was going through an interview process for an engineering role. So he does very specialized engineering for like naval ships. So like very technical, very, very smart man. And he was doing an interview for a company, and the initial screening interview was trying to be done with AI. And he had a horrible experience because he's like, part of the reason I wanted to talk to them was to see what is culture like? Who would I be working with? What are some of these things that are going to be happening at this firm? And so one thing that I'd be really interested to hear your take on too, and I know your personal take here, is there a place inside of that recruiting process where AI from an interviewing process could actually come into play? Now, I have a bias where if it is going to fit in, especially with technical roles, maybe that's a later stage technical interview where we're actually looking at, for a developer, how are you actually coding? How can you problem solve? Same thing for an engineer, where it might not need that human interaction. It's more of an assessment-based interview
Yeah.
versus obviously that relationship side at the start. But I'd be curious to hear your thought if there could be a place where AI from an interviewing process could actually fit in.
Interesting point. So I think, like, to go back to the example there of like a naval engineer, an incredibly specialized job. They're going to have, a whole host of very specific job knowledge that you're going to have to bring out in an initial interview. So I would question the AI model and what it was trained on. How much naval engineering does it know? And as me as a candidate working as a recruiter, I'm going to want to get a recruiter to work with me that knows my market. So they can properly represent me in the market, and I need to have confidence in that. Yeah, I think for specialized roles, I think applying AI to that process for anything that's human facing at this stage, I can't see how it would work unless you were investing a lot of time kind of training models.
Yeah.
And then is that worth your while compared to just developing a relationship with somebody that way and getting AI to do all the bits that it's really good at that you can't do yet, or you don't want to do.
I very much agree. And I know one of the really interesting points we were talking about offline was obviously a huge influx in teams that are actually looking to use AI for systems like admin, process, or even database management. I know from the members you had spoke about, 61% of respondents actually mentioned they were looking to use AI from a database management side of things, and 57 were mentioning that they are looking to use it from an admin process. What are some of the trends that you're noticing?
Yeah, the trend that and when we think about what AI is leveraging, and then when we start getting into, things like what we're just talking about with chatbots, where, I mentioned that you're going to have some pretty specific data for it to, pull through valuable input for you. You're going to have that bedrock of data in your business correct and able to power that AI for it to properly work for you. And that's when things like database management, things like Quill to make sure we're getting the transcripts of the conversations into the database becomes really important as a first step. We do some very, very nice things around, candidate matching, for example. But if you don't have the data in to match those candidates, it's not going to work. So I think that's a really important trend that we're seeing on that is, you have to get your ducks in order. The first bucket I'd say would be getting the data there.
Yeah, the data is obviously the source of truth as we're looking at. I know we were even talking about a really interesting trend that we're noticing not only across the UK, but I've even heard very similar things across Canada and even with some of the US teams that we're meeting with here as well, just around how the mode of actually the model of the recruiting business are really looking to change, where even over half of agency owners plan to use contingency-based recruiting models as their primary source inside of 2025, which means that we're obviously only getting paid when we're making those placements too. We're not getting some of that upfront payment as well from a lot of that retained work. And I think especially when we're looking at some of these trends, even if we're looking at how we're looking to attract candidates, it seems that there's a really big trend that people are looking to find less cost destructive ways to actually find their candidates, looking at things like social sourcing, using their existing database, or even just content generation in general to try to find and place some of these candidates as well. What are some of the trends you're noticing around that, especially as we're looking to find more efficient ways to place these candidates, maybe because of changes around that model and how cash flow might be coming in for a lot of these firms?
Yeah, it comes back to efficiency. I think recruiters are aware that if you've got an established recruitment business, your database is going to be a very good source of candidates in your market if it's been worked over the long term, especially if you've got tools now in place to actually help enrich it. Yeah, and they're wanting to source without having to spend additional money on external sources, marketing, that sort of thing. I know like a lot of agency leaders on the sourcing side of things, that's going to be a real sore point for them if they source somebody on a job board and then they go and search a database and that person's sitting already there because you've paid the credits twice. And that's really where we see that we can impact the reduction in operation costs is by removing those gaps between your systems to make sure that inefficiency doesn't happen. So if you see somebody on a job board, you can easily notice that they're in the CRM and then not pay twice for them. So I think that's really important in terms of looking to manage their operating costs.
Well, one of the really interesting stats that we've seen across the industry is that it's 42.5% of placements that people are making. We are duplicating our cost structures on, going back to LinkedIn Recruiter, any sourcing tools that we're looking to use to pull them back inside of our database. And that's a very common trend that we see a lot of teams leverage just because of a lot of the lack of that database management. Is, yeah, I might be talking to David today for a very specific role. David's awesome, but he doesn't have that one piece that I need because I need somebody who's able to work in Italy instead of on the UK side of things. Oh, I don't know if I want to update my database now because David wasn't perfect here. But 3 months later, when there's a role for a very similar position in a different market, David might be a fantastic candidate for me to look at, but because I didn't take those earlier steps, I'm now having to duplicate a lot of those efforts and cost structures too. And I think that's a very common thing we've seen in any customer facing role, whether that's recruiting or sales or things like that too. So I do very much agree. But I think from a social sourcing side of things, so that seems to be a very, very big trend that a lot of teams are looking to do. And especially with your experience being in a lot of that like contingency based recruiting, like what are some of the best strategies that you've even seen in practice to help people maximize what they're doing from like a social sourcing side of things to keep some of those cost structures down?
Sure, absolutely. I think being able to share content on LinkedIn now that positions you as an industry expert in your market is super important.
Mm-hmm.
From a recruiter's point of view, or even from a marketer's point of view, I would say email marketing over the last few years has become less effective. Just with the amount of noise people get, it's very difficult to, I'm sure you'll be the same as me, you kind of look at your inbox and don't even know what half this stuff is. Let's pick out the important stuff. Okay, people might be a bit more home-based now, but also I think in this day and age, there might be a slight awkwardness around people receiving cold calls from recruiters in their office. It was always awkward before, let's be honest, but I think now there'll be a bit more resistance. Social media gives you a great way to display your brand, your agency, your expertise, what makes you unique. And then it also gives you a really nice way to interact with people through it. Mm-hmm. It's a wee bit more informal to start with. You can be commenting on people's posts, but then also you get the messages and it's a wee bit more, I feel it's a wee bit more private than some of the other methods of communication. And everyone's all over social media. You just need to find the right channel that your market's on. If they're not all on LinkedIn, they'll be on Facebook or LinkedIn. There's no moving back from that, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And even obviously the next biggest one that a lot of teams are really looking to manage is like, how can we use our existing database to do this? And obviously Firefish has some incredibly powerful candidate matching source and things like that too. What would you say are some best practices as you're looking to use your existing database to keep those cost structures down, but making sure you're still scaling the placements and efficiency of your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like what you were saying, before about the example with the candidate, that can't work in Italy, but it'd be a great fit for the role in the UK. Firefish closes that problem really easily. So when you bring that candidate onto your database, we're basically getting you to record the kind of 3 key things that they're looking for: location, job role, salary. So we can start matching people on that. Mm-hmm. So basically, when you add a job, it brings up a list. Yeah, these people all match, but the kind of key things in the job, key things. Yeah, here's a percentage match. It gives you some buttons to click. You can reach out to them, add them to your job. So it's like, so we've just actually made it so much easier than logging into a job board to go and search. So it's there. Like, you may as well look at those 30, 40 candidates the system's pulled through first.
Yeah.
You don't need to go find them, and then it will give you the options to go external once you've exhausted your internal sources. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just making sure that you're capturing that key information, and that's your database is able to use that to power things and power your searches. So that's one of the things that makes Quill integration so powerful, is we can search specific terms and notes that have been brought in from Quill, and then that can build our searches and talent pools to make them super relevant and useful.
Yeah, I love it. And only last question I had, David, because I know we're coming up on time. Once we've actually done that candidate matching, found our list of internal candidates with some of that content and relevancy, what do you see as like best practices for actually that outreach to engage these candidates you've spoken with in the past to try to drive some of that excitement about some of these new roles you have coming up? Are there any best practices that you're seeing and how they can leverage Firefish or systems in order to do so?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our job alerts are designed to keep people engaged. Mm-hmm. So by onboarding candidates into the system and getting a detailed understanding of what jobs they're actually interested in. I always use this example, right? I used to, when I first left uni, I did about 2 years in insurance, right? and I get an email every day from the biggest job board in Scotland with all the jobs in insurance in Glasgow. I've not worked in insurance in a very long time. I'm not interested. And it's all the jobs, so it's all the levels. So entry level to senior director. So what Firefish sets it apart is we're only going to send jobs that actually match what that candidate's interested in. So when they see your agency coming through that's powered by Firefish, they know that the jobs in that email are going to be relevant to what they're actually interested in, and it's only going to be that. So when you start communicating with people, you're not part of the noise, you're part of something relevant to them that they're interested in. And then those job alerts can start giving you insights, you know, if they opened and clicked on things, for example. And then you can get that kind of intent information. So like recruiters always say, that nobody will disagree with you if you say you had a candidate that was salary expectations were 10% out with what the budget was. If they were a good candidate, you wouldn't be doing your job, you're a recruiter, if you didn't pick up the phone to the client and say, look, again, it's a great fit, but they're a wee bit more expensive. Can we do anything in the budget if they're exceptional? Like everyone's going to want to do that in recruitment, so being able to empower recruiters to do that is really, really important. And then when you're reaching your candidates, just making sure you know you're being relevant, personal. It kind of talks back to a lot of what I was saying around the AI interviewing piece, that I think people still want human interactions, and if you can get those important human interactions to be personalised while you're automating all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, I think you're building a very powerful engine for growth.
Yeah, I very much agree. Well, David, I really appreciate the time today. If anyone's curious to learn more about Firefish, where can they find you?
Yep. So www.firefishsoftware.com.
Nice and easy.
And we'll share out a link to the report for everyone to have a read at as well. Some great stuff in there that we haven't discussed around, you know, people's feelings towards the UK recruitment market this year and all that good stuff as well.
100%. Well, David, as always, man, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for jumping on today. But we're really excited to continue the good work here with the Firefish team.
Ideal. Thanks for having me.